welcome everyone to the 35th Annual Small Farm Conference. We're so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for being here on a late Sunday afternoon. My name is Beatriz and I am with the Community Alliance with Family Farmers. And I'm very excited to have you all here. Super thankful to our panelists for creating this space for us and coming to teach us new things, exciting things, and inspiring us. And also huge thanks to our sponsors who make this conference happen and make everything possible. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I see you're also slowly rolling in. As we all get settled in, I do want to set some ground rules for the chat before we begin. Please keep the chats, conversations kind, friendly, no soliciting allowed in our workshops. And that would be greatly appreciated. Also, I want to let you all know that we have a Q&A function in this Zoom webinar. So please use that Q&A function to ask questions. This way, our panelists can keep track of the questions in a nice, neat way, and they can answer them in a timely manner. Sometimes the questions in the chat get lost with all of us being excited and sharing things without, filtering that too much. And yeah, by all means, feel free to let us know where you're at right now. How's the weather out there? Maybe some of you are in some sunshine areas while some of us in California are getting snow for the first time. So yeah, without further ado, I'm gonna let my wonderful panelists take it away.
Great, thank you so much for the introduction. Welcome everyone. I am going to share screen and then we can get started. Okay, so my name is Rachel Callahan. I am the statewide agritourism coordinator with the University of California's Division of Agricultural and Natural Resources. I'm also going to be joined, or I am joined, and we will be hearing from later today from Guida frizzini from True Grass Farms, Susan Kegley from Bees and Blooms, Gregory Nelson from Nelson Family Vineyards, and Cassandra Basilakis from the Government and Community Relations Manager from HipCamp. Oopsie, too far. Okay, so just to give you a lay of the land for what the next hour and 45 minutes is going to look like, I am going to give a brief presentation, sort of a big picture overview of the opportunities and considerations for agritourism. And then we're going to drill down a little bit deeper into camping-based agritourism with Cassandra. And then we're going to hear from Guido, Susan, and Gregory and have a panel discussion about their experiences as agritourism operators. Okay, so considerations and opportunities for agritourism. We're gonna start with what is agritourism and why would you want to do it? And then some recommendations for what to think about when you're deciding whether or not this is the path you want to go down. And then I'll point you in the direction of several resources. So what is agritourism? The University of California defines agritourism as a commercial enterprise at a working farm or ranch conducted for the enjoyment and education of visitors that generates supplemental income for the owner or operator. And there are 5 categories that activities tend to fall within. One being on-farm direct sales, so thinking about the farm stand or your U-Pick, educational experiences, farm tours, workshops, entertainment and events like dinners and weddings, accommodations like camping, for example, and recreation, fishing, horseback riding, etc. So I always like to start with this shared definition of agritourism because the truth is agritourism tends to mean something different to everyone. And I wanted us to all kind of get on the same page about what at least I mean when I'm talking about agritourism. I also take a moment to note here that this is the University of California's definition. The state of California does not currently have a definition of agritourism. Your county may or may not have a definition of agritourism that may or may not look like the one in front of us here. So definitions matter when we drill down into what's allowed and what's not allowed at various locations and counties. And we will get to that throughout our conversation today, but here is our shared definition for at least the next couple of minutes here. So why would you consider starting an agritourism enterprise on your farm business? So for farmers and ranchers and land stewards, this can, there are lots of motivations. There are your economic motivations, like increasing your profitability of your farm business or diversifying your income. And then there are a lot of social motivators, connecting with customers, having a desire to educate the public, and then some other logistical motivations like, selling and marketing your farm products. You might look at this list and say, yes, all of those. I want all of those. And you can achieve all of these goals. It's certainly possible, but I like to recommend that that you think about what are your top 1 or 2 goals and motivators for venturing into the world of agritourism, so that you have a way to assess whether or not you're succeeding in your goals, whether they are economic or social or whatever. And I'll be circling back to this idea as well later. But it's not all about you. So why would the public want to come to your farm? Lots of reasons. Relaxation, wanting that to connect with, an authentic rural experience. To access farm products. This was huge during COVID. Many of our agritourism operators saw a huge increase in the demand for on-farm sales of their products, as well as experiences that felt safe and were outdoors and socially distanced. For their benefits to the community as well. I see agritourism as a way to keep farms and ranches viable, which keeps farm businesses going and can help maintain the rural ambiance and identity. There also can be economic benefits to the community as well. So is agritourism right for you? So there are a couple different buckets that I like to recommend that one think through. The first being personal and family and community assets, and then regulatory and liability considerations, business goals, and marketing plans. And I'm going to go through each of these at a very high level. And I think our panel will help fill in what this looks like on the ground as well. So is agritourism right for you? I'm going to say right off the bat, agritourism is not right for everybody. It's not right for every personality. It's not right for every type of farm business, every location, and that's okay. But really thinking through what your assets are and making an informed decision about what's best for your business is highly recommended. So assess yourself. First of all, do you like interacting with people? Because agritourism is inherently a hospitality business. It's really different from the business of farming, or it can be really different depending on, what activities you're offering. And if you don't like interacting with people and are in the position to hire staff, or you have family members who might be running that part of the business, that's fine too. But these are some of the things to consider. And then assessing your farm, how are you currently using your farm? Can you, have people come into your space and have it not feel like they are walking past your kitchen window every day, or like you can't, plant certain fields because you need enough space for bodies to be in, etc. Assess your surroundings, the community you live in. I'm going to flag here neighbors. Neighbors can be a huge determinant to your success, or sometimes even your ability to offer agritourism. We're going to talk about this more as we go along as well, but in terms of what the counties might allow or be willing to allow, neighbors complaining is sort of the #1 reason why you might be restricted in doing what you want to do on your farm space. So always be thinking about being mindful of your neighbors, have conversations with them maybe before you start your agritourism enterprise. I don't know, bake them cookies, keep your neighbors happy. And under the picture, I just want to flag here, there's a snippet of an evaluating your resources worksheet on the California Agritourism website, which I will highlight for you later. There is a whole worksheet that can walk you through the different things that you might want to, different questions you want to ask yourself when you're deciding if yourself and your farm business is suitable to agritourism. Many of you on today's call may be aspiring farmers. So I just wanted to flag really quickly, if you are looking for land, you want to be thinking about, and you want to have agritourism as a part of your farm business, look for land that ideally is accessible from a main road. Think about writing agritourism activities into your lease. Or at least seeing if it is available. How's the property zoned? Agritourism is not necessarily allowed in all zoned properties. So these are kind of some considerations that you might want to be thinking about if you're searching for land. California Farm Link does a lot of work with land leases and can provide some sample language about how you might build agritourism activities into your lease. Okay, zoning and regulations. This is an important consideration. All counties in California are responsible for regulating agritourism. There are 2 activities allowed by right on agriculturally zoned land. Those are farm stands and farm stays. Even those, though, are regulated by the counties at their discretion in terms of what licensing or permitting, et cetera, might be needed. So you have to know what you're allowed to do. I don't have all of those answers for you today, unfortunately, because every single county zones agritourism differently. So you're going to have to know what your county allows. The typical considerations will include food safety, parking, potentially building codes and ADA compliance. Again, this all depends on the type of activity that you want to do, but you will have to be in conversation with your planning department at least, probably also your environmental health department. And there will be costs, there are very likely to be costs associated with at least some low-level licensing and permitting. Liability and risk management. When you are inviting members of the public onto your land, you are opening yourself up for risk. To the best of my knowledge, agritourism is not considered a farming activity. So your farm insurance is very likely not going to cover your agritourism enterprise or side business of agritourism. You will have to have conversations with your insurance agent about how to make sure you are covered. Safety is a huge consideration. Walk your land, have a stranger, someone who doesn't walk your land every day, come on and point out potential hazards, that, rock that you just know to weave around. They can help point that out for you so that you can maybe move it or put up a sign. Being very clear with your visitors about where they are allowed to be, where they are not allowed to be, signage, ropes, removing obvious hazards and things like that will be in your best interest, as well as for the safety of your visitors, and to make a best effort towards making your space accessible. And if you are, for example, going to have to retrofit a building and meet new building codes, then you will be asked to be ADA compliant. I'm not a planner. I shouldn't have said definitely you will be, but it's highly likely. So business planning, with agritourism, it can look any way you want it to. And our 3 panelists, it looks different for each of them. Agritourism can be really central to your farm business. It can be the main way that you sell your product, for example, and a significant part of your income, or it can be a completely ancillary sort of side project that's really just passive income, and anywhere in between. But I always recommend approaching agritourism as a business. It is an enterprise. It is a business. So I recommend being really clear about what your goals are. Again, even your non-economic goals, your social goals, being really clear about what they are so that you can outline your goals, create a mission statement, and an action plan for how you are going to start or expand your business. Assess your financial resources, even your sort of low barrier passive income. Maybe you are going to do an honor system farm stand. That is pretty low barrier, but there still are going to be costs associated with that. There's still time associated with that. Certainly not as much as, hosting weddings or something like that. But, your time is really valuable and tasks will creep up on you. So again, outlining all of the effort, financial and labor and otherwise that are going to go into your business, and being able to account for that and seeing where you come out at the end, I think is really important. Even if you are completely driven by your social motivators, you really want to educate the public, you really want to bring, youth in your community out on your farm, and that makes you feel good. Are you willing to do that at a break even? Are you willing to do that at a loss? So how will you know if you're breaking even or potentially losing money or earning a lot of money if you aren't tracking that and being really clear about what your goals are and setting your indicators for success? Marketing. So basic marketing. Who is your target audience? Where are they? What do they want to do? Why would they want to come to you? I always like to say, just as important as who do you want to attract is who do you not want to attract? You may not want to offer super family friendly activities on your farm. That just might not be your vibe. Or if you think in your mind that you want to attract a really high-end clientele because you get a lot of bang for your buck, just be mindful that they are going to have high-end expectations. And can you deliver on those? Do you want to deliver on those? So, again, opening your farm, whether or not you live on site, is still opening your home in a way to folks. So, be really mindful about who you are envisioning to come on your farm and how that's going to all play out. And then how you're going to reach them. Word of mouth is still the number one way in which visitors are attracted to agritourism sites, but there are plenty of opportunities for shared marketing, social media, etc. And also, what will they pay? Do your market research. Your local tourism bureau is a great resource. They already know who's coming. They have a whole profile of their visitor statistics and what their average, how much they spend on average per stay, and they have all of that detail. So if you really want to kind of get into that, they are a great first stop to find out some of that information, and talk to your fellow agritourism operators in your region. The community is really open, and there's no sense to do all the hard work when you can just go down the road and ask someone what their experience is. And on that note, partnerships and collaboration are huge in agritourism. You do not have to go at this alone at all. There are many farm trails and other membership type organizations all around California. They tend to be based in counties or sub-regions of counties. I have a few examples up here. We have Sierra Ora Farm Trail that operates in Butte County. There's Sonoma County farm trails all over California. They are a great way to market your organization beyond what you might have the capacity to do as an individual. There are also other agritourism platforms. We're going to be hearing from Cassandra from HipCamp. Whatever feels right for your business and what you're offering, there are strength in numbers. Agritourism is about collaboration. Think about it from your perspective. If you're going to drive out and have a day out in the country, you kind of probably want to make a couple stops along the way and make the most of it. Your average visitor feels the same way. And we're going to be hearing more about that later. Okay, resources. The UC Agritourism program, which I am the statewide coordinator for, it has tons and tons of resources for those who are involved in agritourism, not just farmers and ranchers, but also those agritourism associations that I was just mentioning, and others can take advantage of the agritourism program. We have a website that I will drop in the chat when I finish up here. On this website, there's research, there's statistics about trends in California agritourism, but there are so many resources. For example, guides to starting a farm stand, hosting a dinner. There are budget templates for transitioning fields to UPIC, or budget templates for putting on an event, all kinds of resources on that website for you. I will also be putting my email in the chat. I'm available for questions. And then there's also a newsletter that gets sent out quarterly with more resources. So that's a great resource for you. Also, I'll just point out a couple more resources here. Your local UC Cooperative Extension Office. There's one serving each county in California. They are a great resource. Small business development centers can be a really great resource to help you with that business plan. I mentioned farm trails organizations. CAF, of course, is a great resource. California Farm Link. And this is just to get us started. And I will now stop sharing and turn it over. I think we're going to check in to see if there are any burning questions, but otherwise I'll turn it over to Cassandra.
I think we do have a question, Rachel, from Nori Naylor. What do you mean by shared marketing?
Yes, great question. So that can mean a couple of different things. One thing that I mean by that is getting together with a group to amplify your voice. So like a farm trails organization, and they tend to be membership based. So you pay a small fee, and then they market you all year long. They often have a physical, sometimes physical map showing where all the farms who are members of them are. They have big events. Sonoma County Farm Trails, I think, has 8,000 or something like that people on their newsletter, and they shout out farms every single month. So that's what I mean by that. But it could look very informal. It could just be you and your neighbor up the street who are like, hey, let's always shout each other out in our social media posts or something like that. But just, you don't have to go it alone.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. Thank you so much, Rachel, and I'll rely on my fellow panelists to give me a thumbs up if they can see it.
Looking good.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Cassandra. I'm the Government and Community Relations Manager at HipCamp. Many thanks to the folks at CAF for organizing this wonderful event and for creating space for us to talk about agritourism. And to the folks I get to present with this afternoon, Rachel, Greg, Guido, and Susan, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I am in excellent company, and this is a lot of fun. So I'm here to talk to you today about camping-based agritourism. And I'll start by sharing a little bit of information about HipCamp and third-party platforms like HipCamp to give you some context for where I'm coming from. I'll talk to you about what you may want to consider if you're hosting campers on your farm, touch on the benefits of camping and other low-impact agritourism activities, and give you a look into the current regulatory landscape for agritourism and camping-based agritourism. And you're going to hear a lot from our wonderful panelists on these topics as well. So, briefly, what is HipCamp? Well, HipCamp is a platform we partner with private landowners to create new places to get outside, helping them open their land and create destinations on properties ranging from 2-acre blueberry farms to 80,000-acre cattle ranches. 50% of the folks partnering with HipCamp in the United States are on working lands, and that's true in California as well. A little over half of the folks partnering with us across California are welcoming guests to farms, ranches, wineries, vineyards, you name it. And the way that it works is that landowners sign up with HipCamp as hosts. They create an online listing that shows an area available to campers who search by location and book on our website and mobile app. And when hosts create listings through a platform like HipCamp or Airbnb or Glamping Hub, they typically set their own price, their own availability, their own rules. Guests book and pay for their stay directly through that platform. And typically the platform will take a commission. So for HipCamp, hosts keep 90% of what they charge their guests, and HipCamp takes a 10% commission, which covers credit card transaction fees, liability insurance up to $1 million per occurrence, and property protection. And so there's some of the administrivia that gets taken care of through the third-party platform. So why are we talking about camping at a farming conference? Well, small-scale camping on agricultural land advances the economic interests of farmers in a low-impact and sustainable way. It's consistent with the primary use of the land, agriculture, and it enables farmers to diversify while keeping the majority of their land in production. And I know that I don't need to tell this room this, but our agricultural communities need every opportunity to develop revenue streams that will enable them to keep working lands working. And camping is a big part of that potential and is already a critical source of revenue for many. In 2021, landowners partnering with HipCamp earned more than $31 million hosting overnight guests on their properties, with $1 million in revenue coming in over Labor Day weekend alone. And last year, landowners in California earned more than $6 million welcoming people to their properties. So 2/3 of HipCamp hosts use that income to maintain and improve their properties, and about 40% are using the income they earn from hosting to pay their mortgage or property taxes. Camping can help keep landowners on their land. And not only is it a source of revenue from the overnight stay itself, but camping-based agritourism drives economic activity for the local economy. Campers spend money in local communities. Speaking of shared marketing, whenever I go hip camping, I look to a binder from my host full of recommendations of where I should go, what farm stands and cafes I should check out, where I should get that last piece of equipment I didn't grab on my way out the door. And those campers also buy things, meat, veggies, milk, yarn, eggs from the landowners that they're staying with, increasing on-site sales and connecting with the property they're on and with the work that happens there. And you may be thinking this sounds like a lot of work, and it is. It's important to think about what you have capacity for and how much hosting you want to do on your property. And you need less than you think to get started. You can really get started with what you have, which may be a flat spot where someone can park their car or a space for a self-contained RV. We recommend starting with the basics. You may consider adding amenities as you grow. If you offer a tent site or a yurt, for example, it's important that you provide a restroom and are able to dispose of waste in a way that's good for the environment and human health, as well as compliant with local laws, which could mean a serviced portable toilet, a waterless toilet, a fully outfitted bathhouse. And there are other amenities that campers enjoy, though they aren't required, like picnic tables or potable water that you could consider adding as you grow. Rachel gave a really thorough overview of what to consider when starting an agritourism business. And so I'll mention that these are relevant no matter what activity you want to host on your property. But first and foremost, you want to do your research and make sure you understand what may be required, from permitting to quiet hours. And I'll get back to that in just a moment. Speaking of quiet hours, we recommend thinking about your neighbors and talking to anyone who may be impacted by your hosting people on your property before you welcome your first guest. Rachel mentioned this as well, but this is particularly important if you're hosting folks for overnight stays. You may be thinking about someone who you share a private road with or someone who can see your property from their kitchen window. You want to make sure that you're in conversation with them and that what you're doing on your property won't negatively impact their quality of life. I think Rachel mentioned baking cookies. We have a landowner that we work with in California who says, love up on your neighbors. And I think that that is a really great place to start. And we also want you to make sure that you're setting your guests up for success. You want to remember that you're hosting people on a working farm, which you're very familiar with, but your guests might not be. So set those expectations about where they can or cannot go, or a very popular one, whether or not they can bring their dog. These are some things that you want to think about before you get started. And it's not going to be the right fit for everyone, as Rachel mentioned. And I think that's really important to acknowledge. So those are some things that you want to think about as a landowner, but what does a third-party platform like HipCamp provide? And I touched on this a bit, but there are a lot of benefits to working with a third party, whether that's Harvest Host, Glamping Hub, Airbnb, HipCamp. There are a lot of options out there. And there's a lot here, so I won't speak to everything, but it's typically free to sign up, and a third-party booking platform won't usually make anything unless you do, and you can start and stop hosting whenever you'd like. So, for example, HipCamp provides calendar management tools, including calendar syncing, so you can list across multiple platforms and maximize your reach. And you can indicate what days you're available, when people should check in and out, and how long you want them to be able to stay. Maybe 48 hours is your max. We have a support team that's available every day of the year. As I mentioned, provide liability insurance in the rare event of an accident, as well as property protection should something get damaged. And we help you collect the appropriate occupancy tax from your bookings, which is an important part of doing your research. I'll also mention that a big piece of this is that you get connected with a community that exists already, right? These platforms have an audience. People are searching for niche experiences, whether that's a farm tour or an overnight stay. And so you're already going to be able to reach, by virtue of signing up with a third-party platform, a community of folks who are looking for what you offer, which can be helpful. Coming back around to regulatory considerations, I do want to spend a few minutes here talking about how to get started with that research. And I also want to touch on what I think is a need for clearer, more standardized regulations to make agritourism accessible for farmers like yourselves. And I'll highlight the exciting progress being made on this topic across the country. Rachel has talked about a couple of these things as they apply to all agritourism activities already. And I'd love to touch on them as they apply specifically to overnight accommodations or camping as well. So first, how do you start to do your research? As Rachel mentioned, there's no shared definition for agritourism or standard understanding of what activities may be categorized as agritourism activities. So first things first, figure out how you're located will impact what you need. Every jurisdiction has their own definition. California is one of only 11 states, plus the District of Columbia, that doesn't have any agritourism law on the books at the state level at all. There's no definition, there are no liability protections, right? There's not a ton at the state level. So you are going to be looking to your local regulations to understand what you need to do to get started on your property. The type of accommodation or activity you offer will have an impact here. So if you want to have a farm stand versus a campsite, certainly, but even within accommodations, if you want to have a canvas tent versus an RV site, you're likely going to go through a different process for each one. If you want to have one tent site, you may be subject to different standards than 5 or even 10. For example, in San Luis Obispo County, you can have tent campers on farmland, but if you have 11 sites or more, you need a different permit than if you have 10 sites or fewer, and may be subject to different requirements. So there are a lot of different details. And as you're thinking about what you may want to do, you may consider looking at these regulations first to understand how the different decisions you make will influence what permitting you'll need to pursue and what standards you'll need to meet. Zoning is a big one. I know Rachel touched on this as well. Zoning impacts what you can do on your property, what permits you'll need. And I think something important in California specifically, many counties have some combination of residential agriculture, commercial agriculture, intensive agriculture, and different activities will be permitted differently depending on where your property is located, even if the word agriculture is in your zoning, right? All of those different categories will come with different requirements and standards. And so you may be a working farm in an agricultural zone, but the type of agricultural zone will have an impact. And I'll add that we're here to help. To host campers on working land, you may need to look beyond agritourism regulations. There are ordinances across California specific to agri-nature tourism, geotourism, farm stays, low-intensity camping, rural recreation. And another reality is that the existing regulations might not take into account platforms like HipCamp and low-impact agritourism activities. So there's an opportunity for communities to invest in agritourism and to invest in activities like low-impact camping. A big part of what we're doing at HipCamp is educating folks across the country on the benefits of agritourism, the benefits of activities like camping, and we're seeing progress as a result. So before we move to our panel, I'll share just a couple examples of new and evolving agritourism regulations at both the state and county level in California, Colorado, and Maryland. because I think it's helpful to know what's out there and what other people are doing, because it can serve as a blueprint and it can show us and our policymakers what's possible. So I'll start with Santa Barbara County. They're currently working on an agricultural enterprise ordinance that would allow for certain incidental and compatible uses on agricultural lands across the county. And those uses currently range from small scale camping and farm stays to horseback riding, cooking classes, agricultural processing, educational opportunities. It's something that they're working on as we speak, and really exciting to see them taking on just a much more comprehensive understanding of what agritourism and agricultural business can be. I mentioned San Luis Obispo County. They have a rural recreation and camping ordinance. So the word agritourism isn't in there, but it is specific to rural and agricultural lands. And they allow for seasonal and incidental tent camping on working land, and recently passed an ordinance allowing for self-contained RV sites on rural land as well. Another example in California, and I think this was from 2012, so Tehama County is ahead of the curve here. They've invested heavily in agritourism activities and definitions. They allow for what they call limited agritourism, agri-nature tourism, geotourism, glamping, agricultural homestays, and environmental learning tourism uses on farms. And so that's just a really comprehensive list of different types of activities that could be considered tied to education, recreation, engagement with agriculture. And looking to some examples across the country, Chaffee County, Colorado, in October of last year, updated their land use code to create a more inclusive definition for agritourism and to allow for activities like small-scale camping that will support rural land ownership, that will support the county's longstanding ranching community, that will connect visitors with the county's agricultural heritage, and that will take pressure off of the county's public lands. We're really familiar with this challenge in California, right? People want places to get outside, and it can be really difficult to find one. And recreational opportunities on working farms is a pretty incredible way to experience a different place and a different lifestyle. I think a lot of folks who are looking at agritourism are coming from cities, from more urban areas. They maybe don't fully know where their food comes from or what it means to be on a working farm. And so we're able to educate them and provide them with a space for recreation at the same time, which I think can be really incredible and valuable. And the last one I'll highlight is Maryland. In May of 2022, the state of Maryland amended their definition for agritourism to include camping, opening economic opportunities for their farmers, and making that one of 5 states, including Idaho, Nebraska, Louisiana, and Washington, that do explicitly list camping in their list of agritourism activities. And so there is a lot of movement here. A lot of these regulations are incredibly recent, even in the last year or so. And it's not an exhaustive list, but I wanted to share these examples of places that see this opportunity, that see camping as an important source of sustainable revenue for farmers and ranchers, that see agritourism as a driver of rural economic development for entire communities. It's really exciting progress, and it's important that the regulations that apply to agritourism are accessible. Over the last few years, we've learned at HipCamp how impactful even a single campsite can be. And we all understand that agritourism is a huge opportunity for farmers who need to adopt new and diverse revenue streams to stay economically viable. And incidental camping is one low-impact activity that can enable folks to do that while keeping the vast majority of their land in production. So we're excited to be working with folks like yourselves to welcome people to your farms. We're looking to the future to ensure this is something your communities are able to support and invest in long term. And I couldn't be more thrilled, I'll stop sharing my screen before I forget, to be working with this incredible group of people and turning this conversation over to our fantastic panel. Rachel and I are fortunate to be joined today by not 1, not 2, but 3 California farmers who are using agritourism to diversify their offerings. So I'll pause there and look to the chat. Rachel, if there are any questions I can answer.
Yeah, so I think I'll answer one of the questions that came in, or I'll give, you can add to it. So Mary Chambers asks in the Tehama example, farms, the regulation is written such that farms where agriculture is the primary source of income. So how is this determined? So the idea is that 50% or more of your income, your business's income, will come from farming. And that's because agritourism is meant to keep farms viable. It's meant to be on working lands. The fear is that we don't want someone or people buying up land in the name of agriculture, and really they just have a nice resort and a fancy restaurant, right? This is meant for farms, for farmers and working farmlands. How is this? And you know, are people checking in? Is it regulated? I don't have a comment on that, but that's the general idea. So.
And different jurisdictions will approach that differently. So that's the way Tehama County has chosen to approach that. And often you'll see language like incidental or ancillary or secondary, right? And so that's pretty typical with an agritourism ordinance or agritourism specific regulations. Is just language that makes it clear that this is not supposed to be the primary use for the land. To Rachel's point, we want farmers producing food. We want to keep lands and agricultural production, and agritourism is supposed to be supplemental to that. And I can see a question from Michelle. San Diego County, legality is going to depend on so many different things, like the ones that we've touched on here, like zoning, your specific location, any contracts on your property, what you're planning on doing with the land, your proximity to certain types of roads. And so I'm happy to follow up with you, Michelle, if you want to talk more about the specific area that you're interested in learning more about in San Diego. I can drop my email in the chat. And always happy to chat about what may specifically apply to your property. And then Cami, do you need additional liability insurance, or does HipCamp's liability insurance fee taken from the price cover what is needed? Great question. So HipCamp's liability insurance is third-party liability. So in the event that something should happen to somebody during their stay on your property and they seek action against you, that insurance is coming into effect in that case. And so it's only going to cover folks who have booked through HipCamp. If you do farm tours through a personal website or something like that, you're going to want additional coverage, and there are exclusions. And so I can send you, this website will have the exclusions that apply there. Most folks, for example, who offer horseback riding will have additional insurance. And so that's something that's really important to be mindful of, is that like you may have other activities that you want to offer to folks that wouldn't necessarily be covered by the insurance that comes with a platform like HipCamp. Okay, great questions. And the moment I know you've all been waiting for, our panel. So we'll start with a round of introductions, and we'll be keeping an eye on the chat. Our goal here is to give folks some opportunities to share with you what they do on their land. And we also want to make sure that you have an opportunity to ask them specific questions. And so we'll be keeping an eye on the chat throughout our panel. And then we'll also have dedicated time for question and answer at the end to make sure that we get to any burning questions you may have. And so our panel here, we have Gregory Nelson, Guida Frizzini, and Susan Kegley. And we'll start with a round of introductions here. And I'd love it, Susan, if you're open to going first. Would love for you to be able to share with our audience here who you are, where you're located, and if you'd be open to sharing a bit about yourself and your farm.
Great. Thank you. And I really appreciated both of your presentations. I hadn't known much about HipCamp, so that was really interesting to hear. Ideas. So our farm, I'm Susan Kegley. Our farm is located in Santa Rosa, California, it's about an hour north of San Francisco. And we have about 11 acres. We're certified organic. We have a plant nursery, and we grow vegetable starts and ornamental flowers and trees. And we have bees. We have about up to about 10 or 12 colonies of honeybees. Lavender is our cash crop. And we also have a farm stand. And once we created, what you see in the background of my screen here is our lavender labyrinth. And we did that kind of for fun, but it's also producing lavender. But once we created something, it's pretty special. People wanted to see it. And not only was it good for the bees, it was good for the humans to come and enjoy the flowers and watch the bees and enjoy the beauty. So that's kind of what got us going on this.
Thank you so much for sharing, Susan. It looks unbelievably beautiful behind you there. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna add it to my bucket list. And Guido, would you be open to going next? Just introduce yourself, who you are, where you're located. Tell us a little bit about you and your farm.
Yeah, thanks, Cassandra. Wonderful to be here. Guida Frizzini, True Grass Farms. We're located in Tamales. That's Northwest Marin, an hour and a half north of San Francisco. We are primarily ecological grazing outfit, and our home base in Tamales then lends itself by being on this body of water that's one of the esteros, which is it's a tidal marsh that comes into, there's two of them in California, and they happen to be up here just north of the bay. So primarily we do finished beef, we do lambs, eggs, and our primary revenue is from livestock. And then during COVID, what happened is our wholesale markets shut down. And we looked at how to sell the meat that we had, but also how do we diversify in terms of revenue. And so we looked at HipCamp, which we had tried a few years back, and it was an amazing success during the first 2 years of COVID. People being outside, we started with very simple primitive campsites, and it's been a wonderful experience.
Thanks for sharing, Guido. And Greg, would love to learn a little bit more about Nelson Family Vineyards. And I think you're muted here, but I think I can unmute you.
How's that?
Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Well, such great presenters. I hope I can keep up with the crowd. A little bit about us. We are located in Mendocino County. We're halfway between Hopland and Ukiah, right on US 101. As a result, many of our campers, actually most of our campers, are on their way to somewhere. Either we just had a camper from British Columbia on their way to Los Angeles. So that'll tell you about what kind of campers we get. I grew up on the ranch and returned after graduating from Cal Poly in ag business. I currently farm with my two sons. One of them is our winemaker and the other is our ranch manager. Our primary crops are wine grapes and pears. We also have a choose and cut Christmas tree operation of about 4 acres that I started around 30 years ago. We lease 10 acres to a strawberry farmer. He started about 25 years ago. We lease our range land to a cattleman. So we have about 600 acres of mountains. We started Nelson Family Vineyards Winery about 20 years ago when my younger son lost his job. I forget which crisis it was, but he came to Dad and said, gee, why don't we start a farmer? Or why don't we start a winery? We have a tasting room. We host weddings and concerts. We started hosting RVs in 2020. Again, like Guido, when the COVID restrictions reduced our tasting room attendance and people were looking for an outdoor recreation opportunity. We are dry camping, so we don't provide any water, any electricity. And I have to say that I haven't picked up one piece of trash. All of our campers have been, very good at cleaning up after themselves. So HipCamp, our HipCamp site is located on a ridge top across the freeway from the tasting room that overlooks the valley and the vineyards. We have 6 dispersed graveled dry camping sites on about 5 acres, and we also provide a 5-acre hiking or bicycling trail. The campers share this site part of the year with cattle. So we have installed a keypad actuated automatic gate, which works well in it for a couple different situations. Number one, the guests need to check in at the tasting room to get the keypad combination. And of course, that gives them the opportunity to taste our wines. The gate keeps the cows out, keeps folks that we don't want out, or keeps the cows in, keeps the folks we don't want out. So that's might be helpful for some people. We don't have a lot of shade over there, so we're planting trees and plan to add picnic tables. When I consulted with the county planning department, I found out that a permit was designed, the permit they were offering was designed for concentrated high commercial use campgrounds, and it would cost me over $7,000. That took me back a little bit, and so I stalled to get the permit. And I found out that our county is creating a new permit category for agritourism county, and it'll cost in the hundreds of dollars instead of the thousands of dollars. And it might be interesting for some people. I also found out that our county camping is not a permitted use on ag preserve contract lands. Fortunately, this portion of the property isn't in ag preserve. So the couple lessons that I've learned is that it's very positive to diversify. We found the synergies increased our income. Guests that stop for strawberries often come into the tasting room. The same with Christmas trees and vice versa. So that is helpful. And we always try to start small and grow organically. That way our mistakes don't cost us as much.
Words of wisdom there. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love what you said about having folks come get the code through the winery, right? That they like, it's like walking through the gift shop on your way in to the campsite. I think that's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that, Greg. And I think it is really what you mentioned about regulations, right? That folks are learning and adopting, right? And evolving and modernizing. And I think that that's a really important piece as well. I think agritourism regulations are new in the last 10 years, kind of as a category overall. So really appreciate all of those insights. And I'm curious, Susan, if you could share a little bit about the logistics, right? How did you decide how to get going and, how to approach it and how to make it approachable?
So we heard a big story that had legs. It was circulating around Sonoma County. So Sonoma Lavender, which some people may be familiar with, it's a fairly large business organization. They had a lavender farm over in the Sonoma Valley. And they decided to have a lavender festival one weekend. Wow. And it went viral on Facebook. And they managed to shut down Highway 12, one of the major arteries, the major artery into the Sonoma Valley, and they had to cut the whole thing. So we looked at that and said, we don't want to do that. We want to avoid this. And so one way of handling this, you need to think about, if you do put something out there, you have to be able to handle the number of people that decide to show up. And one way of doing that is to charge money and make reservations mandatory, sell tickets. It also brings in some money. We didn't quite start doing it that way, but we limited the number of people who could come. So we started out doing it for free, but people still had to make a reservation. And then to leave, it turns out that people are willing to pay to come to see your lavender. And we're like, okay, well, that'll be great too. So we're open sometimes where we charge during lavender bloom, we charge admission. And during the rest of the year, we're open, the farm stand is open on selected weekend days. We're not open all year long. And that really works. Then the people who live in the county don't have to pay the admission charge. They can just come on the other open farm weekends. So we had to think about managing the number of people. Parking, we have plenty of open land that we can use for parking, but a lot of the other lavender growers in the area do not have that luxury. So that's something that you really need to think about. And then staffing it. We overstaffed last year. I think that would be one of the things we're definitely changing that this year, and we're going with better signing. Our signs are pretty good as they are, but they take a lot of maintenance, and the wind blows them down and all that kind of stuff. You have to mess with them all the time. So this year I've got some very serious signs that I hope I won't have to redo over and over again. Think about efficiency of using staff. There's more, but I'll let somebody else go too.
Thank you for sharing that. I think those are parking is such a huge, I feel like you maybe wouldn't think about parking until it's too late, right? I think that's such an important one to call out, is just making sure that you're set up for the number of people that you might attract, and thinking about your best and worst case scenarios, right? Like playing them all out. If I have 100 people, what happens? If I have 5 people, what happens? And I think that that's really important to consider, both in terms of like your space and logistics, but also your staffing, like you mentioned, which is such an important part of it. And Guido, I'd love it if you could share a little bit. You mentioned that, when COVID hit, you were thinking about, okay, how do we diversify? And did you have other activities that you considered, or how did you land on overnight stays as the way that you were going to make that gap, meet that gap?
Well, a few reasons. So one, being an ecological grazing outfit, we look at land management as just a holistic approach. And that includes, not just using animals for grazing, but also like humans back in the ecosystem as like an interface. And so it was like an important, I would say almost like philosophical pillar of us wanting to also like educate our customer base and have them connect with the land that produces the food that they purchase and understand the effects of their food choices. I think that was like a huge component on wanting, to have a little more interface, almost like a one-on-one. It is a tremendous amount of work. We learned our lessons the first year, but like the happiness of seeing like children playing in the grass with the cows, less than 20 feet away, understanding that like the grass through photosynthesis transforms and we can get proteins from working lands, and what grass finished means versus grass fed and finished. So just the nuance of what goes into food production while enjoying a beautiful landscape was a driving force. The other one, we find most resilience in biodiverse environments. So of course, multiple revenue streams helps. And also people tasting something from the place. And so they're like, oh yeah, coastal grass-fed beef will taste different than something from the Sierra foothills or up in Mendocino in the Oak Woodlands. And just introducing that concept to people, same as terroir. And coming from my background, half Tuscan from Italy, like agritourism and that idea of like hospitality being sacred, and really, again, trying to get people to enjoy foods from a local area. Yeah, and we really wanted to focus on primitive campsites because it's the way I love camping and it's an easy way to start. But it's just really we spread our campsites really far, like they're like over 50 to 100 feet from each other. And so people really like enjoyed that. We had a lot of people that came to like watch the migration of the birds or during bird nesting season. These are seasonal campgrounds. And just we emphasize that ecological learning through this. So I think having not just like a monetary reason to do it, but like if we can work on like talking about agritourism county by county to revitalize farming as a viable source of like food production versus, focusing this on the only way to sustain a farm because the economics are making it almost impossible to make a living farming. I think that's where agritourism could help switch and educate and sustain actual food production.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I love the way you're thinking about it holistically, right? That it is the agriculture and it's also the kind of lived environment that folks are in when they're there, right? From the migratory birds to the cows that are grazing. And there are some really interesting studies happening across the country on how introducing people to farms in kind of the agritourism environment changes their consumption practices, for example. I know I would only buy lavender, Susan, from you after going somewhere like that. So Trader Joe's, no way, right? Like it helps people understand what does it mean to support a person and a place, and how can you use your money in a way that is investing in the environments, the landscapes, the practices that we value. And Greg, you had mentioned that, you noticed that you didn't have a ton of shade. And so you're thinking about picnic tables. How have you evolved your offerings over the years, right? It sounds like, you and your son decided to invest in a winery, right? It sounds like you've made these decisions with your family and based off of different needs at different times. If you could just share a little bit about, how the offerings have evolved and what you're thinking about for the future.
Well, part of it is comments from our guests. Let's say, boy, it was 107. There was a nice breeze, but it was a pretty hot breeze. So
107.
We do have a small eucalyptus grove on the ranch, and so that's an easy transplant for us to make. Same thing with picnic tables. So, we'd also like to offer a dump site so that the RVs can unload their sewage before they leave. That's something we have in the works. I was thinking also a little bit about logistics. I take care of all the reservations. They come to me. Our staff is primarily for the tasting room, so they're not available in the evenings, and you'd be surprised at how many emails I get at 9 o'clock at night, people wanting a reservation. So and then we put that on a worksheet for the staff, so when they come in, they can see how many campers are coming in that day. It's very convenient with the tasting room because they're not busy all the time. They can take in guests. We almost always do a tasting when they come in, but we'll have people saying, geez, we can't make it by 5 o'clock. What do we do? And so what we have is we have a packet of information, including a map on how to get to the campsite. So we'll have people come in at 7, sometimes 9 o'clock at night, and let themselves in, basically. So the other issue that we've worry about a lot is fire. We've had quite a few fires, so we don't allow any flame at all during the summer months. In the winter, of course, if they want to have a barbecue and whatnot, it's not an issue. We have supplemental insurance. We were talking about insurance. We have $5 million worth of I want to call it overhead insurance. The term's not coming to me right now, but insurance over and above our typical insurance.
Umbrella.
Thank you, Susan. So as far as marketing, another synergy, because we market the camping on the winery website, and the winery website, we get guests because people find out that, they not only can taste wine, but they can come camp. When we do concerts, we'll get as many as 12 campers that, they'll spend the night as well as go to the concert, or they come to spend the night because of the concert. So there's a lot of synergies if you have more than one activity at once going on.
Wow. Sounds like you have just a real diversity of offerings there. That's pretty incredible.
Well, it's evolved. We've been doing this for over 70 years. So
you mentioned that you grew up there. Did these exist when you were growing up there, or have you introduced all of them?
No, none of them existed. And when you have younger sons, they have all these wonderful ideas. So we've grown quite a bit since the boys have been on the ranch.
Thank you for sharing that. And Susan, you mentioned a little bit around, parking, learning from your neighbors, and then staffing and signage. What are some of the other pieces of your agritourism business that you found have worked really well? What have you improved on? What's gone wrong? And, how do you evolve?
Well, I would say we were overambitious at first, and there's another lavender grower in the county, Bill McElroy. And at the Eco Farm agritourism conference, he had this great line. He says the 5 most dangerous words in agritourism for an agritourism operator are, wouldn't it be neat if? So we suffered from that. And, so how about an Easter egg hunt? Oh, how about, anyway, many, many different things. Some of them were quite good, and some of them we're still doing. We have a Friends of the Labyrinth membership program. Oh, wow. And this, we started it in spring of 2020, which was then we had all these events planned for our members and couldn't do any of them because of COVID, but they could come to the farm, they could be outside. They did pick from the vegetable garden, and we now have incorporated that. But you have to, I would say that it's really important to look at the activity that you're thinking about doing, project out how much is it going to cost, how much staff do you need, how much of your time do you need, how many materials and supplies do you need, and then how much income is it going to bring in. It doesn't have to bring in a profit, but if you really enjoy doing it. So my criteria is either it has to make money, or I really need to love doing it. And that's what's changed over time, is we've narrowed our focus so that we're doing more of the things that we like and bring money into the farm. So yeah.
Wonderful. I love, wouldn't it be neat if that is just, I hear
Changes
that
words.
every day. Yeah, I talk to people with, just like, oh, and we want to do this and that, but before we get started, we have to make sure they're all perfect, right? And then, the to-do list gets incredibly long, and suddenly you're looking at just 100 projects. You couldn't possibly finish them all at once.
Had a business group come and do a tour of the farm. That's another thing we do, is we do educational tours on pollinators and
Wonderful.
pollinators and those things. But we had a business group come from San Jose or Santa Clara University, and they were all, wanting to know about the operational budgets and, what all the details, right? And one of the comments that I got back and was seconded and thirded was, "You're doing an awful lot of things. Maybe you should narrow your focus a little." So, that was really good advice. And, we've done that.
It sounds like you took it.
Yeah.
That's always helpful when you get advice that you can actually make use of. Absolutely.
Can I just interject really quickly?
Absolutely.
So we have a little bit of research on agritourism in California, not a lot, not as much as I'd like to, and it's something that I'm working on. But there was a survey that went out in 2019, and the average number of agritourism activities that an operator in California will have is like somewhere between 2 to 3. And we saw a sort of negative relationship with profitability to those who offered too little, so maybe just 1, or those who offered too many, 5, 6. So there was like a sweet spot to it that sometimes you have to find the hard way. And these exceptions always break the rule, or make the rule, whatever that saying is. But yeah, there is always a sweet spot to those things. We had a question in the panel that I thought would be good to just circle back to, which is, have any of the panelists had to mitigate any traffic issues with neighbors? If so, how did they go about it?
That's a great question.
I don't, it's not neighbors so much that we live on a super busy road. It's the second busiest road in the county, Petaluma Hill Road. People go fast, way too fast. There's accidents in front of our house at night, mostly all the time. And so we also have a pullout in front of our farm. That's the only pullout for several miles. People want to park there. And if they park there, then they're backing out into a road where people are going 65 miles an hour. So we're like, not going to do that. And so we block it off. We block it off with, cones and pink tape and things like that. And we have big signs out front that say, "Park inside," and we have, we're going to try to do without that this year, but we had someone at the gate, waving people in, getting them off the road so that they're not a hazard. So really close attention to that is very important, because accidents will happen for sure.
And I think you mentioned that you even, when you had days when you didn't charge, you had people make reservations for parking. We see that. I think that's something that any area that's dealing with a large capacity, whether that's like a public resource or private, it makes a lot of sense, right? In terms of managing the volume of folks that are coming in and being a considerate community member for the people that may be impacted. I think I think that's a really wonderful way of going about it. It's just making sure that you're resourced for it.
Yeah, and I will say that parking on roads outside of a property can be a liability issue as well. Not only are you going to make your neighbors mad, and that's going to draw attention from the county folks, and then they're going to want to come and shut you down, or make you pay a lot of money to have like a left-hand turn lane. Greg, you might know something about that. But also there's been litigation. There have been, unfortunate examples. I want to say someplace in the middle of the country where coming from a haunted house, pumpkin pick situation, someone died on the road walking because they parked their car on a busy road, and that farm was taken to court over it. So it is also a liability issue to consider.
And often there will be requirements, right? If you want to have a certain number of people on your property, you need to have off-street parking on your property. that is appropriate for the number of people you want to have for that reason, right? It's there to protect you as well as your community. So I think that's a great point. And I did have a question, Guido, for you, if you'd be open to sharing. You mentioned that the camping on your property is seasonal, and also that it's a lot of like one-on-one work and like a heavy lift. I'm curious if you could share a little bit about how you decide when you want to host folks, how many days you want to be open, like what your capacity is, and if that changes year to year, or do you keep it, consistent?
Yeah, so the first year we were doing a lot more one-on-one. We also wanted to build our reputation. So, I mean, we were milking goats, making gelato with like seasonal ingredients, making focaccia delivered by hand. So we went above and beyond. Then we had a baby. And so now we have a centralized little shop that people can come pick up their orders. And I have to say, like, interfacing with HipCamp over the last few years, that's the platform we use, was pretty incredible. So like, just the orders are simplified, the calendar dates are easy, there's reminders, and it's been very smooth thanks to that. So I think choosing your platform, understanding the ins and outs, really makes for a successful operation. And just, clear communication. You're always going to get those people that are going to ask a million questions. So I think there's ways in which in your preliminary email out or first contact, like, have a way to vet if somebody's going to be the problem camper or not. But 99% of them are dreamboats that we've had here. So it's been okay. And with the neighbors, for example, we were upfront in the beginning, just being like, hey, if something comes up, please, it's blame us. So talk to me. We have 5 neighbors. Mostly it was the concern of like, some campers, if they've only been on public lands, like, aren't necessarily the most respectful. So we also have an email that describes how to leave no trace. And if they do kayak, that it's all private land besides the public waterway, and not to approach a bank unless it's an emergency, and just like explaining the process, how to approach an animal, the flights, just kind of like educating around like what it is to be in a land, talking about biosecurity. So there's little things that I think are important on how to educate and make better campers as well.
Absolutely. I think setting expectations is the single most important thing that you can do to set yourself up for a successful interaction, but also set your guests up for a positive experience, whether that's a day trip to the lavender farm or an overnight stay at the winery or at True Grass Farms, right? Like, that expectation setting is going to make sure that everybody knows exactly what they're coming into. And I think that's incredibly important. Thanks so much for sharing that. I think, Greg, you were saying you get emails at 9 p.m., right? People wanting to come and stay, and being able to like have expectations and also like set your own boundaries, I think would be important to make sure that you're able to like do what you need to do on your property as well.
Yeah, to follow on Guido's coattails, one of the items we discuss at some length are rattlesnakes, and how not to behave and how to behave. Our camping is on the rangeland with the cattle, and so dogs have to be on leash, and we alert to them the negatives of scaring the cattle, that they have to be courteous to animals as well.
Absolutely. I had an interaction with my mom, who wanted to go camp on a farm, and she wanted to go with a friend who had a dog, and she said, oh, but all of the reviews say that the host dog is so nice, so I think she'll probably be okay with me bringing my dog. And I said, that probably means you shouldn't bring your dog, right? Because interactions with animals, and like, they set that rule for a reason, and make sure that you're reading all of the details and make sure that you understand, what the expectations are there, right? Just because somebody has something doesn't mean that you can bring it as well. And so I think like that education, what do you do when you're there? What do you do when you interact with an animal? What do you do when you have something on leash or off leash, or there's livestock there? It's so important, because this is your home and your livelihood. And I think like the education around that, I think, Guido, you were saying some folks are used to being on public lands, right? Like, what is like the education that we can provide to make sure that people are treating your farms really well, but then also when they go to somebody else's property or to public lands, to make sure they bring that education with them, to their next agritourism experience, to their next camping trip. Yes, please.
Can I add something? the way we got started with doing agritourism is through Sonoma County Farm Trails. I don't know where people are from who are in the audience, but Sonoma County and several other counties also have this, but the Farm Trails organization is a nonprofit that promotes agriculture in Sonoma County. And they did all the advertising. They've got a spring open farm weekend and a fall open farm weekend and holiday shopping weekends. And they really got us into it by, doing a lot of the work. I mean, getting the word out is actually a huge part of the job, and they do a great job at that. But they also, and this is something Guido alluded to earlier, we want to be sure that we're educating people about the importance of agriculture in their lives. And so that gives us a chance to do tours to talk about the importance of the honeybees and the native bees, and what they can do for pollinators by creating a garden that's good for them. And we, also do a tour about lavender and lavender processing and those kinds of things. But it's about connections. It's really about connecting the people who don't live on farms with the farms, and so they realize the benefit of it and learn, like Greg and said, learn how to interact with nature and appreciate it better.
Can you share a little bit more, Susan, about like who your customer is, right? Like who do you find is coming to your farm and coming back to your farm, and what is some of the feedback that you get from them about the educational opportunities that you're providing there?
So we have a pretty good contingent of people with young kids, and they want them to come and enjoy the farm. It turns out that if you're under 10 and you go to the labyrinth, you have to run it to see how fast you can do it. That's predictable. And then we also have young couples. We are in the middle of getting our permits for doing weddings and things like that, and so we've got young people enjoying the flowers and maybe scoping it out, we hope. And then we also have a lot of gardeners. We this year are offering garden workshops where we do 2-hour sessions on various subjects to educate people about, or help people with their own gardens. And so there's lots of different types of things that are going on in that vein.
Wonderful. Oh, it sounds like such an incredible experience. And it sounds like maybe there are people who have been inspired by your property to go and do something similar on theirs too.
Right. It's actually led to some consulting work for me on people starting, like a lot of the vineyards, they have beauty in most of the vineyards, work hard at making their vineyards look gorgeous. And a lot of them have roses everywhere. And so some of them are turning to lavender. It's a nice complementary plant to the vineyard. So I've been doing that work now.
That's incredible. So you're consulting for folks who want to do something similar on their land. You have like an agritourism business built on your agritourism business.
Well, no. They want lavender. And so we propagate lavender plants from our the varieties of plants that we have on the property. So we can sell them starter plants or obtain what they need from other places if we don't have what they want. And lavender's a little, it can be quite picky depending on your soil type and your, where you live and what the weather's like and those kinds of things. So it's, you can kill it pretty fast if you've got it in a soggy spot and, or a shady spot. So we help them by testing the soil and making sure that they've got everything, nutrients that they need in the soil, and sourcing plants and providing guidance. So, yeah.
Wow. So first of all, it sounds like you're all just really like inspiring the people around you with all of these activities, right? Susan, not just the people in this room who are listening and thinking about what they could do on their land, but you're also in your own community, like literally facilitating other people building out their businesses as well. That's incredible.
Well, we hope so. We want there to be lots of pesticide-free, organic pollinator forage around the county as much as possible.
Oh, thank you for your work. And I'll be mindful, I've lost track of time a little bit because I'm just, the information is so incredible. And I know that we have a couple of questions, I'm sure. But before we jump into those, just if there's some real nuggets of wisdom here, and I'd love it if you could each share, what words of wisdom do you have for the room? Like if you could leave them with your number one tip for getting started with agritourism or what to consider, what would it be? No pressure. You've all shared so much incredible information, but what would your words of wisdom for future agritourism or agritourism curious folks be? And let's see, Greg, would you be open to going first? Oh, let me unmute you here.
There we go.
Perfect.
You can get my cursor on it. I kind of spilled the beans when I made my introduction. So I don't think I have any negative, things to share. We've had exceptional luck. The HipCamp platform has been wonderful as far as scheduling and the newsletter is always interesting. So the two items that I opened with, I think, are the same ones: diversification, and start off small and let it grow organically.
Those are great tips. Thank you so much for sharing those. Diversification, start off small, and let it grow organically. Susan, do you want to go next? And then Guido, you'll close us off.
Sounds good. Plan ahead. And the way you can do that, one of the best things to do is to go scour other people's websites and see what they did. We found a really great one that helped us with kind of a perennial problem with, oops, did I turn my video off? Sorry.
Yes, I wasn't sure if that was.
Didn't mean to do that. So
You're back.
yes. So there's this place called Wicked Tulips, and they've got 3 farms. They're in New England, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. And they had this amazing, so I was having problems dealing with people canceling their reservations, and then you have to refund tickets, and it's a lot of extra work. And what do? Do you say no refunds and make them mad? Anyway, they had this amazing policy on their website, and I was like, ooh, I like that. I'm gonna adopt that. So I would say, don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. That's my words of wisdom. There's a lot of people out here that are doing some really good things. See if you can, I'm sure people would be happy to talk to you. Call them up, send them an email. Don't be shy.
That's great advice. That is great advice. I'm sure you're all going to be hearing from folks after this. So, and Guido, last but not least.
I mean, to me, I've always tried to recreate how I love to travel. So it's been sometimes, being able to find a spot and then getting to know the host and having some of that interface so you can learn about the place. I mean, I remember when couch surfing first came out. I don't know if people are familiar with that, but it's a free website of people hosting people, and you could travel for free and not just stay in places and have a house and a shower, but also meet somebody from the local area. And I think the localized knowledge and the way we can share that about bee health and biodiversity and winemaking and the process of farming and being proud of a product from the place is a fundamental thing that agriculture can help. And again, really alleviate the burden that agriculture has kind of come with at this point in history of just being a product, and it needs to be a product of place. And I think agritourism can help that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I completely agree. It is just such a powerful tool, and it's such a rich area of learning and enjoyment. And so just feel really lucky to get to do this with all of you, and feel really grateful for the work that you're all doing on your properties. I mean, it is just incredible to learn about. I think I speak for everyone when I say it is just so inspiring to hear about what you're doing on your land and how you're sharing with others. It is all about that connection and education, and just the generosity that you show when you open your doors and gates to people and take the time to share what you do and what you love with them. I think the impact that has, children, adults, everyone in between, it is just incredible. And I just think it is absolutely just the wave of the future in terms of learning and experiences. So thank you all so much for sharing and for everything that you do. And I only left 5 minutes for any questions we didn't get to. I'm so sorry.
It's all right. Yeah, this is the last workshop of the day, so don't feel that rushed. You're good. I just want to remind folks to please answer that survey at the end of this webinar when it pops up. But I love that you're getting a lot of hearts and little applauses as reactions. And I love that all the Zoom people have found the reaction button on this, which makes it feel so wholesome. So yeah, don't rush. I mean, you still have some time as well.
Okay, perfect. Rachel, were there any questions that I missed in the chat there that you want us to get to before we finish here?
I have been answering most of them. So check if you're on the call, feel free to look in the answered section. A question came up twice that I think we should just briefly circle back to. And basically it's kind of where we get started with the zoning and the regulations. And I've been pointing folks to start with your local county planning department. They should be able to tell you if you're going to need to talk to other departments like your environmental health department or something like that. I will say, we talked about this earlier, regulations are different from county to county. The pathway is not always clear. It's not always consistent. Sometimes you can talk to two different people at the planning department in your county and maybe get two different answers and not always know the path ahead of how much am I going to have to spend at the end of the day here, right? It's kind of like step by step and it evolves. And most planners will tell you, I got to come out to your property. I got to see. There's not a one answer. It's all case by case. So it can be a frustrating process. I just want to be transparent about that. I recommend starting with your county planning department. I recommend talking to other folks in your county who are doing the same activities that you want to do, and to not get frustrated and let that stop you, because even when you hit roadblocks, you can email me, talk to Cassandra if it's camping related, talk to Kath, and we can help advocate and write the policies. Agritourism has been happening forever, right? But it's also really new when it comes to codifying it. And I'm working with the UC Agritourism program to create more structure for agritourism, to have shared definitions, to have protections at the state level, and to write at the county levels to create policies that are friendly to agritourism. Cassandra's been doing a lot of work with this, CAF has as well. So the future is for us to help write, but you might not be able to do everything you want to do tomorrow. So I just want to be really transparent about that.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I think that's so important. And there have been a lot of questions coming in from specific counties. There are counties with agricultural ombudspersons, right, who are like there to support you in your county for agritourism and agriculture specifically. If you're a member of your farm bureau, they're an excellent resource, right? CAF, you're in the right room, and is the short answer to, how to start building the support that you may need to find the answers that you're looking for. And Rachel and I connected at the International Workshop for Agritourism this past fall. And, what we walked away from that with, the takeaway was like, there's so much that we could do. And Susan, we walked away from it thinking, wouldn't it be neat if? And so there's so much exciting work happening on this topic across the country, internationally. And to Rachel's point, like this future is ours to create. And good things take time. Anybody who's worked with me on this topic in the past knows that that's my motto. But I think, working together, we can really start to build the future of agritourism and agriculture in California. So really appreciate all of the incredibly thoughtful questions, and also just the willingness to have this conversation and engage on some of the questions that we maybe don't know the answer to yet.
Yeah, and once again, thanks to the Susans and Gregs and Guidos of the world, because you all are out there doing it and creating great examples of the power and value of agritourism and of our farmlands here in California. And the rest of us are just working to catch up with you and help support you. So I think that while from sort of a structural standpoint, we're catching up. The on-the-ground work is so inspiring, and the nonprofits that have popped up to support agritourism, all of that, there's beautiful, exciting, inspirational examples all around California. So if you're not already starting your agritourism business, go be an agritourist.
Love that tip. We've gotten some questions about contact info. I'll drop mine in the chat if folks are comfortable, no pressure, but you can message each other on the Sketch website and app as well. This conference is just getting started. Lucky us, we have days of incredibly rich material still to come. So I'll drop, if I can find my chat box, I'll drop it in the chat, but you can use the platform as well. Let's see. Yeah. And you can send it to everyone or just hosts and panelists, right? Like there's, perfect. Susan nailed it.
And we ended on time. So
I know.
Look at y'all. Good job.
we got the dream team here.
I love it. So
That's good.
timely. We really appreciate it. And I really do hope to see other folks at the conference. This is a 5-day event. It is just the first day. So there's a lot more to come. There's some other amazing workshops out there that I'm sure many of you would be interested in. Yeah, and just it's a marathon at this point. And yeah, I'm very excited to see a few of you have been here all day with me. So it's been fun to see that.
We got to see Guido's baby, the perfect way to end.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And I'm just going to give it like one more second here so folks can copy those emails and put them in your notes document somewhere, because the chat does get saved, but it's Zoom. So I don't always trust the Zoom gods. Thank you, Megan, for adding that there. Yeah, everything's available through Sked as well. All right, everyone, happy rest of your Sunday and happy Monday tomorrow, which I thought was today, but it's not. So I hope you all have a great start of your week. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye
Bye.
now.
Thank you.
Bye.